kind of what first caught my eye this week, though you've always got lots to cover and lots to say. Unfortunately, in some ways, you're like a firefighter. You kind of wish you didn't have to do your job, but it needs to be done there. And the government makes sure that you've got employment security because they're always wasting our tax dollars. But the big carbon tax rebate, they almost made it celebratory. Yeah. Look, everybody happy. Look at all the money coming back to you. Not quite the windfall for people in reality than that they like to make it out to be.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it turns out that the Trudeau government isn't exactly being honest with Canadians. Corey, I know you're shocked, but the Trudeau government is claiming that families are going to be made better off with its carbon tax and rebate scheme. But hold on a second, because the government's own independent watchdog, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, is showing that the federal government is using magic math. So the carbon tax this year will cost the average household anywhere from about $300 all the way to $670, even after accounting for the rebates. Again, that's according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer. So the Trudeau government is telling us one thing, and the government's own independent watchdog is saying, no, that's not true. The carbon tax will cost the average family hundreds of dollars, even with the rebate.
And best of all, of course, that we always talk about, how well has it worked on reducing emissions so far?
Yeah, not well at all. Not well at all. The carbon tax is not this low-cost environmental plan. The carbon tax is a high-cost tax plan. I mean, the Western Standard, let's talk about the most western province in Canada, British Columbia. It has had the highest carbon tax in the nation for years, and emissions continue to go up. Data on Trudeau's first year of the national carbon tax shows that emissions went up there. Okay, so there's two claims that the federal government is really misleading Canadians on. Number one is they're trying to sell Canadians that this is an environmental plan. Well, if you look at the data, it's pretty clear that it's not an environmental plan. It's a tax plan. The second misleading claim is that they're trying to make Canadians think that you're going to be better off with these rebates than you are paying the carbon tax. And of course, that's not the truth. The carbon tax, even with rebates, is costing those average households hundreds of dollars every year.
And this is a time when we can ill afford to be doing that. And of course, we got the other hidden and second carbon taxes that are going to keep slapping on and piling on with this. I mean, this isn't just a static thing. This is the sort of thing that keeps going up every year, right?
Well, okay, so there's a lot to break down there. So number one, you're right. The carbon tax is only going to get worse and worse, because Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he'll keep cranking up his carbon tax to nearly 40 cents per liter by 2030. So this is what that means. It means that from now through 2030, the carbon tax and rebate will still cost an average household anywhere between $6,400 if you're living in Manitoba, all the way up to $13,000 if you're living in Alberta. And again, that's after accounting for the rebate, and that's the government's own independent watchdog's numbers. But Corey, you know what else this isn't considering? The second carbon tax. We just saw the regulations that the federal government released of its second carbon tax through fuel regulations that will be coming into effect next year. Now, here's what happens with the second carbon tax. If companies can't reduce the carbon content of their fuel, if they can't meet Trudeau's requirements, they have to pay a second carbon tax. But the government's own research shows that it's going to be consumers who get hammered from the second carbon tax. It could add up to 13 cents per liter extra by 2030. There's no rebates with the second carbon tax. And Corey, I know I'm going on, but one more point. The government knows exactly who the second carbon tax is really going to impact. If you read their own impact analysis, it shows that it's lower and middle income Canadians who are going to get the brunt of this. It's the single moms. It's the people who are already struggling with energy poverty. It's those seniors who are living on fixed incomes who the second carbon tax is really going to punish.
Well, that's it. I mean, you know, inflation alone is already beating on people in that situation, and they just get their unreasonable requests. Well, the single parent should just ride the bus. Oh, that's great to take the kids to school, to soccer practice, pick up your groceries, go across town, go to work, come back, pick up. It's not realistic, but it's funny. Our woke government likes to throw out the word privilege all the time, but a lot of those ones bringing that down on everybody it's because they're in such a place of privilege. I don't think they understand the hardships they cause on working Canadians when they do this sort of thing.
Corey, I have to pick up right there. There's two things. Number one, I think we have to stop pretending like these high gas prices are an accident. They're not an accident. Every time the Trudeau Liberals are passing by a gas station, they must be patting themselves on the back because these high gas prices are exactly what the Trudeau government has been pushing for with its carbon tax hikes, with its second carbon tax hikes, with its attacks on the energy industry that reduces supply, no more pipelines law, discriminatory tanker ban. Corey, you know I can go on and on and on. But one thing we have to talk about here is what you just said. It's the people who are inflicting this pain that seem to be shielded from the pain. And Corey, here's the perfect example. The Bank of Canada has one job, keep inflation around 2%. And what did we just find out? We just found out that the Bank of Canada has been busy handing out $45 million in bonuses and pay raises during the pandemic when it obviously failed to keep inflation low.
Yeah, and I mean, it's been said by a lot. Like, we saw this coming. We were talking about this long ago. I mean, if the Bank of Canada was going to be responsible, they should have been starting to creep up then the prime interest rate 6-8 months ago, rather than suddenly coming in with a hammer at this point. And as you said, they're kind of patting themselves on the back now with bonuses for having dropped the ball.
Well, look, at best, the Bank of Canada failed to keep a lid on these rising prices. But at worst, it is actually driving the inflation by printing hundreds of billions of dollars out of thin air. I mean, the Bank of Canada had its money printer on overdrive during the pandemic. It's printed $300 billion out of thin air. And Corey, I mean, like, come on. Every layman even understands this, is that if you increase the supply of money, the value of each unit goes down, right? So come on, like the Bank of Canada needs to do a better job. In fact, the deputy governor of the Bank of Canada admitted that they failed to hit their inflation target. So if you have one of the leaders in the Bank of Canada who's admitting that they failed to hit their inflation target, well, then why are they handing out pay raises and bonuses? I mean, it really doesn't make sense from the perspective of the Canadians whose money relies on the central bank to actually do their job right.
Yeah, but that goes to show kind of government versus private sector, right? Like, if I underperformed and I was sourcing columns that were poorly read and my show ratings were crap and our advertisers are fleeing, I know that Derek, if he doesn't fire me, he's not going to be giving me any raises or bonuses. I mean, It just doesn't work that way. But in government, we have the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, the ones who want to come after our home equity. They all got bonuses, and CBC executives who came begging for a bailout during the pandemic, they're all getting bonuses. So, I mean, there's definitely two classes in this country, and it's between the private and public sectors.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Corey. I mean, it's really unfortunate to say this, but we have seen the tale of two pandemics. One pandemic was full of absolute pain by the private sector. So many people. I mean, I was in Calgary. You're in Calgary. How many friends and family members and neighbors do we have who took a pay cut, who may have lost their job, who may have lost their small business and the life savings with it? But then in government, there were no pay cuts. Where were the pay cuts in government? There weren't. There was pay raises. There was bonuses. There was overtime pay. There was all of this, right? And you're touching on an important point here. And that's that taxpayers are being forced to pay for poor performance. The Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, they have one objective: housing affordability. Okay, well, home prices went up by 13% in 2020. Home prices went up by another 21% in 2021. So then why did they hand out $60 million in bonuses and pay raises during those years? Let's look at the federal government. They handed out, $171 million in bonuses during the pandemic, but the departments failed to meet half of their own performance objectives. Corey, on top of that, the feds also handed out $1.6 billion in overtime pay since 2019. So we're spending buckets of cash, hiring new bureaucrats, buckets of cash paying for overtime, bonuses, pay raises, and we can't even get the government to meet its own performance objectives.
Well, yeah, I mean, some of those material things we can see with government services, we're hearing about all the crisis that's going on. People can't get their passports renewed. As simple as renewing a government document that they've been doing since Confederation, we've had passports. And they still apparently can't figure out how to renew them. And we've got millions of people in immigration now on a backlog. Like, the government's spending more and more, and we're getting less and less.
Yeah, I can't believe we have to say this, Corey, but bonuses and pay raises are for when you do a good job. But like these departments, the Bank of Canada, the CMHC, they're not doing a good job. Why are they getting pay raises and bonuses? And if you just give bonuses away like you're giving away participation ribbons, is it really a bonus or is it just a slush fund? Right. But here's the thing. I mean, in the private sector, if you were to fumble the ball like the government is in many of these departments and crown corporations, you'd probably get shown the door, to your point, not be showing a huge bonus check. So, I mean, it's so frustrating from taxpayers' perspective. But Corey, who we should really be looking at here is our politicians in Ottawa. What are they doing? We pay them six figures to actually protect the public purse, if I could say that. But what are they doing? I haven't heard any members of parliament really make a stink about all these pay raises, all these bonuses. I mean, I've seen a few, but not many.
Well, that's it. I mean, we're seeing excuses coming hard and heavy for inflation. They like to keep pretending it's a global thing. We can't do anything about it. I mean, there's a little bit of degree. Okay, there's some things that are going to be beyond their control, but still there are things they can do to mitigate it. And as you said, the Bank of Canada pouring more and more money into the mix is doing that. But I mean, we aren't even hearing a whisper from the federal government of getting spending under control. So I can't see how this is going to change.
Oh, Corey, I'm so glad you brought that up. I mean, yeah, you're right. Other countries are going to see massive inflation when other countries do crazy things like run unbelievable amount of deficits or have their money printing on overdrive as well. When other countries do that, surprise, surprise, they're going to get the same bad results. And look, yes, global prices or prices are going up around the globe, but Canada isn't exactly doing well. Okay, if you look at the International Monetary Fund, they track consumer price increases around the world. In 2021, only 3 of 35 industrialized countries had higher inflation than Canada. So Canada had what? Higher inflation than 31 other industrialized countries, according to data from the International Monetary Fund. So it's not like the Bank of Canada governor, Tiff Macklem, can just shrug off this inflation and say, oh, it's just a global phenomenon, because clearly Canada is not doing good. It's not like we're Hong Kong, which is 1.8% inflation. It's not like we're Japan, which is close to about 2.5% inflation. It's not even like we're Switzerland, which is close to 3.4% inflation. Canada just announced 8.1% inflation, which is the highest annual increase since 1983, Corey.
Yeah, I mean, if our currency starts losing value, and that's the reality of what inflation is, that's completely within the control of the government. I mean, if there's a loss of purchasing power because of internationally traded commodities like oil and gas, then yeah, there's only limited things they can do. But there are things within their control. And as you said, when you can point out exceptions with other countries that aren't suffering by this, their excuse starts to fall pretty hollow. I mean, just because 100 countries are doing a stupid thing doesn't mean it's not still a stupid thing. $300 billion. What do you think happens when you print up $300 billion out of thin air, right? That's the problem. It's that you have the government that can print $300 billion out of thin air, but you can't just go around printing new farmland or printing new homes out of thin air. So you end up with the perfect storm for inflation, which is too many dollars chasing too few goods, right? We know that that's what happens when you print up a whole bunch of money and you just throw it into the economy. Now, that's exacerbated by the fact that we just went through 2 years of revolving government lockdowns, which mean that we just can't continue to create as many goods that money could buy during that time, right? So the perfect storm for inflation was created by Canadian governments. Are there many other factors that influence prices? Sure. But we can't let our government off the hook for this mess that they have, at least in part, created. Well, I know you guys won't let them off the hook. And of course, I love hanging them on the hook whenever possible. But all the same, let's hope we see some positive change. I guess the start's to at least just keep pointing it out and driving it home to people that they got to tell their elected members to change their bloody behavior. So where can people find more information on what you guys are up to and what you're doing, Franco?
Well, you know what? I would recommend that all your listeners pick up the phone or send an email to your member of parliament and ask them what they've done during COVID-19 with their pay raises. because all members of parliament have been busy giving themselves 3 pay raises during the pandemic. So I would love to encourage your audience maybe to give them an earful. But please, 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 please check us out at taxpayer.com. We've got petitions you can sign, and you can follow all of our work in the newsroom tab.
Right on. Well, thanks for the latest update. And, well, I'm sure you'll have nothing but a bunch of positive news the next time we get you on.
Yeah, don't hold me to that, Corey.
All right. Well, I'll let you go and get back to work there. Thanks, Franco, and I'll talk to you soon.
See you later.